All right, some good words today. All right. Two words have been kind of running through my mind just in the last week especially, but just as this whole thing began. Two words I've been very afraid of. Number one is fear, and the other word is isolation. I know those two words are the devil's playground. In our fear, and when we isolate ourselves, that's when the devil can do his best work. And you've seen it in your own life. You've seen it over and over. When I get afraid, all the emotion overwhelms me, and I lose sight of what God is and what God can be in my life. And I start to fail to trust him. We see it in the life of Saul. King Saul was always afraid, and he always failed to do God's will in that. And in this idea of isolation. And that's where I get anxious about getting us back to church and getting people back to church. And I don't want us to be afraid, all right? There's no reason for us to be afraid, all right? There is fear. There's something to be feared. There is disease out there, and there is a cause for fear. But there's not a cause for cowardice. And I want us to be able to distinguish between those two things. You see, it's okay to be afraid. It's not okay to hesitate in the presence of that fear, though. And courage is not the lack of fear, it's the lack of hesitation in your fear. And that's where I think the church is at its best, when it doesn't hesitate. And the church is at its worst when it always makes excuses and hesitates and won't step out and won't step forward. It was said that when the plague was ravaging the cities of Rome and the cities all throughout Europe, that there was a crowd, massive amounts of people going out, leaving the city, fleeing the city as fast as they can. And there was a trickle of people coming into the city, and those were the Christians. The Christians were not fleeing in fear. They were coming to see what they could do to help, to give their life if necessary, to aid and comfort those who were being just ravaged by the plague. All right? I want the church to be seen as something like that when we come out of this. All right? And I'm not sure what it's going to take, but I know this. Fear and isolation are the devil's playground. So let's stay away from that, okay? Hey, we're going to jump back into our 7-mile series. What we did, on Easter Sunday, we looked at just the events of Easter Sunday, and we focused on what I'm calling the Emmaus boys, and you can see the picture. I love this picture. There were two of them that on that Easter Sunday morning just bailed. They were done. They had probably been following Jesus. Maybe many of them had been following Jesus as early as his baptism, right, which was the inauguration of his ministry. 3 years, a lot of them had been following him. And I don't know if maybe these two guys, maybe they had been following him since his baptism. They just weren't in the 12, the apostles. But these two, after Jesus crucified, everything looked bleak. All of their expectations, all of their hopes were just shot. And they said, I'm done. I'm out. I can't do this anymore. And so Jesus comes alongside of them because I think there is something in Jesus that just doesn't want to let people get away from him. And I think there's this beautiful thing, and Paul writes about it in Galatians 6:1. You who are spiritual, chase down the people who are slipping away. Chase them down. Love on them. Bring them back. Restore them back to Christ if you see people slipping away. I think Hebrews was written for this whole purpose. The whole letter to the Hebrew church was this: don't let anybody get away. Don't let anybody slip away from you. Fight for people. Look in the letter, just go do a search. The words let us, not let us like on your sandwich, all right? Let us. Do a search for that and see how many times you come up with that in just the letter to the Hebrew church. Over and over and over. Let us be about this. Let us be about this. To hold on. And so Christ chases down these two guys. And he walks up on him and he says, and I think he kind of eavesdrops and listens on. And he goes, what are you two arguing about? It's literally, what are you throwing back and forth to each other? It's kind of the Greek phrase on this. What are you throwing back and forth? Almost like dialogue. And they stopped in their tracks. And the text says their face looked gloomy. And I want you to see, they go from gloomy face to heart on fire. Now, what happened in between? It says their faces were discouraged. They were gloomy in their face, their expression. And they said these words, we were hoping, devastating words right there. We were hoping he was about to redeem Israel. Now this word redeem, it's the word lutroo in the Greek. It literally means to ransom. It literally means to pull somebody out of captivity, out of bondage, all right? And I think what they had this image of is Rome is holding us in bondage. He's going to come and redeem us away from Rome, all right? But here's the thing. If he gets you away from Rome, who's next? If God gets you out of your present circumstances, what's next? Do you think if we could just get rid of this coronavirus, man, everything would be great like it used to be, right? No, it's just something else that's going to be next. And I think these guys thought, if he will just usher in the kingdom, we'll be good to go. If we could just get rid of Rome, if he'll just redeem us from those guys. And the whole point is, it wasn't Rome that was keeping them captive. It was their sin. And it's the same thing for us. It's not our external circumstances that are keeping us captive. So when they say, we were hoping he was about to redeem Israel, to save Israel, I always say what? You got to ask the question, from what? Save you from what? What is it you needed saving from? All right? So that's what I want you to see in there. And then Jesus responds. He says, didn't the Messiah have to suffer? Now, at what point, remember when Peter is having this conversation and Jesus says, who do you think I am? And what's Peter's response? What's Peter's response? You're the Christ. You're the Messiah. And what did he mean by that? He means you're going to redeem Israel. You're going to throw out all the Romans, throw out all the bad things. We'll usher in this kingdom. It'll be just like Solomon's days. That's what I'm expecting of you. And then Jesus rolls right into this. Now, you need to understand this. I'm going to be betrayed. I'm going to be handed over, and I'm going to be crucified. And what does Peter do in this moment? No. Jesus, come here. Come here. Jesus, have you just not read the scriptures, Jesus? Come here. Look, you're supposed to be the Messiah. You're supposed to reign. It's going to be great. It's going to be just like when Solomon was king. And he says to Peter, what? What does he say to him? Get behind me, Satan, adversary, because right now you're getting in front of me and you're trying to lead me down a path that will not result in your good. Because what if he does throw out the Romans, establish the kingdom, and walk in there and say, all right, everybody who is perfectly blameless and sinless, come on into this beautiful kingdom. Who walks in? Nobody. And they just totally miss this. They totally miss the fact that we all have sin. We all have shame. We all have guilt. And we cannot walk into the presence of a holy God. It will not happen. I tell people it's like walking into my house wearing University of Texas Longhorn gear. You ain't getting in my house. My wife will not have any of that, all right? The cult has determined that that's not allowed, all right? You get that ring, you do all that stuff, you just don't let it in the house anymore, all right? And it scares me how many of us want to walk hand in hand with someone who is just caught up in sin, not judging them, not condemning them. We want to walk hand in hand, and we want to walk them right up to the throne of God, and we go, good luck in there. I don't want to offend you. I don't want to say anything about your sin. I don't want to tell you how Christ, the blood of Christ, has cleansed you from all that. We just want to say, well, I want to be their friend and love them, and then let them go into the throne room of God and say, good luck. That's not love, people. That's neglect. So Jesus, he talks with him. He says, didn't the Messiah have to suffer? Didn't there have to be the shedding of blood? I mean, we've had 1,500 years of what? You sin, what do? You grab a bull, you grab a goat, you kill the goat, you kill this, and it dies on your behalf. Didn't the Messiah have to suffer? And I don't even think they've even thought about it. Didn't he have to suffer? And he begins with Moses and works through the prophets. And it says he interpreted for them all the things concerning himself in all the scriptures. So he took the story, and like we've been doing for the last couple of weeks, he took the story of the Sabbath, where God worked for 6 days and then rested on the Sabbath. And he went, oh, here's the thing. Remember how the Messiah did all of his work and then rested on the Sabbath yesterday, where Christ sat in the tomb? I'm interpreting this is what this meant. This is what this was foreshadowing. God created and I recreated. And then we get the story of Adam and Eve, how they were naked and felt no shame, and yet then they sinned, and what? They hid themselves because what? They said, because we see our shame. And God took an animal, an innocent animal, killed that animal, removed its skin, its hide, and covered them. Do you see the innocent dies for the guilty, and they are covered? We looked at Noah. The story that God poured out his wrath on evil, wicked humanity who was always wicked all the time, but yet God created this ark. God put this ark into play, and he says, if you'll just believe into this, if you'll believe into this ark, you will be saved. Wrath of God. Last week we talked about Abraham being told, go sacrifice your son Isaac. And he walks him up on this mountain, this very mountain range to where Christ was crucified. And Abraham is taking his only son, the son that he loved, and he has to sit there and has to kill it, has to impute his sins onto him and then kill him in his place. And right as he's about to do it, what does the angel of the Lord do? Whoa, 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 Abraham, Abraham. Now I know that you love me. Now I know that you fear me. And what do they find? The ram caught in the thicket who dies in place of the boy. This is what's going on in the Bible, throughout the whole Bible. There is a substitution that takes place. You know why? Because you could not do it for yourself. No amount of good works is going to make up for the sin and the shame and the rebellion in your life. You had to have a substitute, and God knew it, which is why he became flesh, dwelt among us, and died in our place. That's the story of the Bible. It's not do really good stuff, be really kind, be really nice, be. It's not all this stuff. It's look, do you see that he has substituted himself for you? Now, in light of that, who will you be? That's worship. That's when we get into worship and we don't mess around with just morality. Because, listen, morality never leads to worship, does it? Think about it. If I'm really moral, if I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't cuss, I don't do drugs, I don't, what do I think of myself? Look at me. I turn into a Pharisee real quick. But when I'm the tax collector and I beat my chest and I can't even bring myself to look up and I say, God, have mercy on me, I'm a sinner. And he says, yes. Now how do I get up from there? I get up in a posture of worship. And I'm moral because I worship. Don't get those things confused. All right? I got to get to preaching because I'm getting caught on too many squirrels today. All right. Now, how do they come out of this? Their hearts are on fire because they're hearing the message that God is truly meeting their needs. All right? Now, here's what I want us to do. I want us to keep going. Basically, we've been sprinting through Genesis, okay? So we did creation, then we did the fall, then we did Noah, and then we did Abraham and Isaac. Now we're going to keep sprinting through. We're going to go from Abraham, Isaac, and we're going to go into Jacob. Now, Jacob has how many sons? Come on, talk to me. Come on. I don't want to do a monologue here. How many sons does he have? 12. Good job. All right. So who's the oldest? Come on. Louder. Reuben. Then we get Levi, Simeon, Judah. Can anybody keep going? I can't, so don't worry about it if you can't. All right. We get Issachar and Gad and Dan and all sorts of guys. Asher thrown in there. All right. I always thought Asher should be the last. Thank you, God, he's the last because I'm done. All right. Throw Dinah in there. We get a daughter in there that's really not really mentioned there because it's sort of that patriarchal society. And then we get who? Rachel. Think about this. Jacob has these wives. And y'all know the story of Rachel and Leah and Jacob kind of being on his wedding day, pulling up the veil and going, whoa, that's not what I was looking forward to. All right. And then, Laban says, oh, well, if you'll work 7 more years, you can have the daughter that you really wanted, the one who was easy on the eyes, as the text says. All right? And so Jacob gets married and starts having these kids, and it's Leah, the one who is not loved, who has these kids. And eventually, Rachel has a son. And what's that son's name? Who is Rachel, the one that Jacob loves, has a son, and what's his name? Joseph. Now, where is Joseph on the scale here of who's loved and who's not loved in the family? You got Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Issachar, Gad, all those guys, and then you get Joseph. Anybody the Joseph in your family? I have other brothers and sisters. They're tolerated, but I am exalted and loved. I am the true son, all right? And how does Jacob express this love to Joseph? What does he give him? The coat of many colors, all right? If you've been on Broadway, you've seen the Joseph in the Technicolor dream coat, all right? He gets this. Now, what does this do to the relationship between Joseph and the brothers, all right? So some of you, all right, some of you may have a Joseph. Maybe you're not the Joseph. You're Issachar, all right, in your family. How does this work? What happens? Sibling what? Rivalry, all right? And they think what? We don't really care for this young man. And then all of a sudden one day he shows up and has a dream. And what's the dream? Guess what, guys? I had this really crazy dream. You're all going to bow down to me. I don't think that helped. I just don't think that helped the dynamic here. And so they think what? Let's get rid of him. He's not, we don't like him. All right? So the original plan was, let's kill him. All right? So Judah has a better idea. Judah says, hey, let's don't kill him. We don't get anything out of this. Let's sell him. Good plan. All right? So imagine being Joseph, and you're the baby boy. All right? Benjamin, we're not sure when Benjamin is born in the story, which I really wish I knew, because that would mean that would add a whole dynamic. We don't know when Benjamin was born, as far as was it before or after Joseph was sold into slavery. We just don't know. All right? It very well could have been he was born a year after Joseph was born. We just don't know. I wish we knew, because then that would create this dynamic between Joseph and Benjamin. All right? But they send him off. They sell him into slavery. Now, here's the thing. We get Reuben, the firstborn. What should Reuben have been doing in the moment? What was the responsibility of the firstborn son to the others? I mean, eventually he's going to get the blessing. He's going to the birthright. He's going to get the double portion, and he's going to be in charge of the family. So what's the responsibility of the firstborn to the baby? Some of you are the firstborn, all right? And I know our culture is different, but what should he have done? The text even says Reuben had the idea, let's throw him in the pit and just leave him there and not kill him ourselves. Because why? What was his motive? What was Reuben going to do? Reuben says, I was going to come back and get him later. Now, that took a lot of courage, didn't it? Did it? If you look at the life of Reuben, what do you see over and over and over every single episode in which Reuben is involved? What do we see? Fear and cowardice. Every single time. And in this moment, he should have stepped up. Judah comes up with the idea, hey, let's sell him. At least we can make some cash off this thing, all right? So Joseph is sold into slavery. He lands at Potiphar's house, right? How does that go? He does really well, all right? The problem was, and this is my life verse from the scriptures, that Joseph was a well-built and handsome man, okay? Now, I know I've told that joke 100 times to my family, and they don't appreciate it, but my real name is Joseph. Okay, and so I have this verse, Genesis 39:6. Now Joseph was a well-built and handsome man, which attracted the eye of whom? Potiphar's wife. So Potiphar's wife starts to play this little cat and mouse game, and eventually one day he gets caught by the cat. All right, she has him thrown into prison. All right, and I love this. Every time in the story of Joseph, it says he gets into this horrible circumstance, but yet God was with him. God was with him. God was with him over and over and over. So even in prison, he goes in, and the warden kind of takes him in and kind of makes him sort of the teacher's pet or the warden's pet, if you want to call it that. All right, and he puts him in charge of the other prisoners. Well, the cupbearer of the king and the baker come in, and they get thrown into prison because Pharaoh wasn't happy that day or whatever. All right, maybe his happy meal wasn't cooked right. All right, so he gets thrown into prison. They get thrown into prison, and then they have this dream. All right, and this dream gets played out, and one of them ends up dying, one of them ends up living, but the one living forgets all about Joseph's ability to interpret dreams and leaves him there in prison for another couple of years. And then Pharaoh has a dream, all right? And he can't understand it, and no one can interpret it. And all of a sudden, boom, the cupbearer remembers, I remember that guy in prison, which you would think you would remember that, right? All right, you were about to die, and some guy interpreted a dream, and it came true, and you lived. I would remember that guy, just saying. But he remembers this guy and goes, hey, there was this guy in prison. He interpreted our dreams and just nailed it. So they go get Joseph, bring him to Pharaoh. Pharaoh tells him the dream. What's the dream? 7 years good, 7 years of famine, all right? Joseph interprets the dream, tells him exactly what's going to happen. They go, we need somebody to be in charge so we don't get caught up with the famine. And Pharaoh says, I can't think of anybody better than you, Joseph. Promotes him to the second in command. All right, everybody still with me on the story? All right, I'm getting to the 7 miles where we talk about Jesus, all right? Now, we start in with the story, and there's 7 years of good, and then we hit the bad. Now, what happens to Jacob and the brothers living up in Canaan when the bad hits? Were they prepared? No. No. So a couple years into this, and I'm in Genesis 42 if you want to catch up with me there. I'm still kind of jogging through this, so I'm not going to read word for word. It says in 42:1, when Jacob learned there was grain in Egypt, he said to his sons, why do you keep looking at each other? Listen, he went on, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt. Go down there and buy some for us so that we may live and not die. So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain from Egypt, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin with his brothers, for he thought something might happen to him. Now, read between the lines on that story. I'm not going to send him because something might happen to him, but I will send you 10. You never know. Like I say, we have twins, all right? I have a spare in case we lose one of them, all right? So I can send one of them out into the world in danger, but if I lose one, yeah, I've got a spare. This is kind of the idea of what he's saying. Why? Because Jacob loves Benjamin. Why does Jacob love Benjamin? You gotta pull back to this. Why does he love Benjamin? Because he is the son of the wife that he loved. The wife who, what? Died in childbirth, giving birth to Benjamin. This is all he has left. And I want you to understand the love he has for Benjamin. All right? You have to understand that to understand the story, to understand the dynamics in this story. So what do? They go and they bow down to Joseph because Joseph is in charge, right? Now, in Joseph's mind, what's going on when he sees his brothers bowing down? See, told you. And as a little brother, you got to own that for a second, right? All right, any of your little brothers in the room, you know this is a good moment, all right? He's enjoying this probably a little too much, all right? But what does he do? He recognizes them, but he immediately says, you guys are what? You're spies. You've come to spy out the land. You're trying to hurt us. And they go, no, we're not. And again, we don't know the relation. I wish we knew the relationship between Joseph and Benjamin before this. I wish I could see my little brother. So he goes, you guys are spies, and the only way you're going to prove you're not spies is if you bring this little brother that you're claiming, if you bring him and I see him. Otherwise, you're spies. And all of you are going to stay in prison. I'm going to send one of you back home. He changes his mind after about 3 days. He goes, never mind, I'm going to keep one of you here in prison and send the rest of you back home. So who gets left there? Simeon. I don't know if Joseph just didn't like Simeon, if he was the meanest brother of all of them. I don't know why. But Simeon gets left there, and they send him home. Well, they walk back in, and Judah starts to explain what's going on. And Jacob is just devastated. Why? Because he's already lost Joseph. And now he's being faced with the decision now I have to send Benjamin. Does he ever mention, now I've lost Simeon? It kind of gets thrown in there. Yeah, that Simeon guy. It's Simeon, whatever his name was. Where's he? All right. Reuben in this moment, all right, this is the end of 42, says, send him with me. Send him with me. And if I don't bring Benjamin back, you can kill my 2 sons. And Jacob looks at him and says, he's not going with you. Wow. Why? He's the oldest, right? He's finally stepping up. But what does Jacob know about his oldest son? What has he been known for all his life? And you got to understand, Joseph is probably 40 years old at this point. I mean, Reuben may be well into his 60s. We don't know. What does he know that Reuben has done all his life? And why should he expect anything different? It's all fear. It's all cowardice. It says he's not going with you. Now they run out of grain. This pick him up in 43. They're starting to run out of grain. And so Judah steps up. In 43, in verse 3, it says, but Judah said to him, the man specifically warned us, we will not see me again. You will not see me again unless your brother is with me. If you will send our brother with us, we will go down and buy food for us. But if you will not send him, we will not go. For the man said to us, you will not see me again unless your brother is with me. To which Jacob says, why have you brought so much trouble on me? All right, it's all about Jacob, all right, in this story. And then in verse 8, it says this. And here's what I want you, listen to this story. Listen to a brother talking to his father about his brother. But hear the words of Christ speaking to his father. All right? Y'all with me? You got to do this or you're going to miss the point. Then Judah said to his father Israel, send the boy with me. We will be on our way so that we may live and not die, neither we nor you nor our children. Verse 9, I will be responsible for him. You can hold me personally accountable, which is a beautiful phrase, which our English just sort of butchers it. It says, literally, you can receive him out of my hand. He will be in my hand. If you seek him, he's going to be in my hand. I'm going to take that kind of care of him. If I do not bring him back to you and set him before you, I will be guilty before you forever. If we had not wasted time, we could have come back twice by now. Now, here's what I want you to see, and here's what I want you to hear. Judah steps up and says, I will be responsible. I will be personally accountable. Send him with me. I wonder if this is the conversation that took place before the creation of the world. I want you to think through this. We've got God the Father, we've got Christ the Son, we've got the Trinity, we've got the Holy Spirit there. And I wonder, and this is not something in the text, so don't go looking for this in the text. This is just something that I've kind of conceived in my own mind. Because Jesus always referred to as he was the one who created. That Jesus, the Son, was the creator, all right? Which has always troubled me, and I saw this one day, and I thought, maybe this is why he's called the creator. Because God the Father, if he desired to create, he saw the future and saw that humanity would turn away from him. And Jesus stepped up in that moment and said, send the boy with me. I will be responsible. I will be personally accountable. I will bring him back to you. And in that moment, God said, okay, if you will do this, then we will create. If you will step into their place when they fall, then we will create the world. I just wonder if that's what the conversation was. So in 44, they go. 43 and 44, they go back. And Judah's got him. Now imagine, y'all have seen Saving Private Ryan, most of you, all right? I always remember that Tom Hanks' character basically says to the Saving Private Ryan, you're going to be right here by my side. You're not going anywhere. I wonder how Judah, where Benjamin was next to Judah, all right? I mean, like, handcuff him, all right, hold on to him, You're not getting away from me. That's how I'm going to be accountable for you. Well, they go back, and they show up, and all of a sudden, Benjamin walks in the room. Joseph is in the room, and Joseph just loses it. He sees his little brother. He loves it. He says, bring him to the house, all right? They set up the banquet table, and they're seated in order of their birth, which had to have freaked him out just a little bit at that point, right? You sit down, and it's like your name cards are around the table in birth order. And they look at Benjamin's plate, and Benjamin has 5 times as many chicken nuggets as everybody else in the room, okay? And so it's just this weird thing, and it's like, okay, y'all go back home to your father. And they load up the provision, but Joseph says, put my cup into Benjamin's sack. They let him get just far enough away, and they goes, okay, now go get him and bring him back and accuse them of stealing. Now, here's what you have to do with the story. The fact that Benjamin was framed, you got to let that go, all right? You just got to let that go, okay? Because what the reality you have to understand is Benjamin is now going to be found guilty. Now, the slaves catch up with the brothers and Benjamin, and they empty out their sacks, and guess what? There's the cup. He's guilty. And Judah in this moment, imagine being Judah in this moment. What are you thinking if you're Judah in this moment? You're responsible, and now you're thinking, there's no way Benjamin would have stolen that. And we were like, well, none of us are guilty. And then all of a sudden, plink, it falls to the ground. Imagine how you feel if you're Judah at this point. I know if I had a little brother and they had done that behind my back, I would have been, oh, you don't need to kill him. I will take care of this myself, all right? But immediately, what does he do? He starts to plead for the life of this kid. Why? Does he love Benjamin? What does he think in this moment? Does he think, oh, they planted that, he's being framed? No. But what does he do? He pleads for Benjamin. Why? Who does Judah love? His father. Judah wants Benjamin out of this situation because he knows how heartbroken his father is going to be. There's an interesting dynamic. Who does Judah love more? His father or Benjamin? It's a great question. Who does Jesus love more? His father or you? I love the answer yes. That's the answer I love. Because he died for me, but he died for me so that I could go back to my father. So in this moment, he goes, oh, we're all guilty. We'll all stay here. We'll all be your slaves. Why is he doing that? He don't want to go home. He's going to be responsible for this. He's like, I would rather stay here and be a slave of Pharaoh than to go home and face my father. Why? Because he knows, I know the grief. I know what my father's going to experience in this moment if I don't bring my brother home. So they go back and they have this conversation. And catch up with me here in 44 and verse 18. It says, but Judah approached him and said, sir, please let your servant speak personally to my Lord. Right? And you got to get weird on the pronouns here, my Lord and your servant and all that stuff. Just read between the lines. Do not be angry with your servant, for you are like Pharaoh. And he tells the story. Here's what you told us. You told us we could not come back if we didn't bring our brother. And then we went home, and that's kind of in verse 24. We went home and we told our father what you had said. And he like, oh, no, I can't believe you did that. Why would you do that to me? Blah, blah, blah. He says, you're not taking him back. And then finally, I talked my dad into letting me bring him back with him. And now this has happened. So pick up in 30. So if I come to your servant, my father, if I go home and the boy is not with us, watch this phrase, his life, my father's life is wrapped up with the boy's life. Jacob's life. And in the Septuagint, in the Greek version, it's the word suke, it's the word soul. My father's soul is tied up. It's this figure of almost like ropes. These ropes have tied my father and Benjamin's, their souls are tied together. You don't understand. His life is wrapped up in the boy. And I think some of you need to hear this today. Your Father, your Heavenly Father's soul is tied up with his creatures. That every single one of you in this room, that God's soul is tied up with you. That's the affection he has for you. And I think some of us tend to roll off into this, well, who am I in this whole mix? I'm just one person out of 7 billion, 8 billion, however many on the planet. And besides that, you don't know what I've done. God would never, his soul would never be tied up with mine. And I want you to understand this. You are a unique creation. And no matter what you have done, no matter what you have even thought, his soul is still tied up with your soul because he created you and he loves you. And Judah recognized this. He says his life is wrapped up with the boy's life. 31, when he sees that the boy is not with us, he will die. Then your servants will have brought the gray hairs of your servant, our father, down to Sheol in sorrow. Your servant became accountable to my father for the boy, saying, if I do not return him to you, I will always bear the guilt of sinning against you, my father. Now please, let your servant remain here. Do you see this? Watch this. Let me stay here and let the boy go home. Who does he love? Who does Judah love? Verse 33, look at it again. But please let your servant, let me remain here as my Lord's slave. Remember what Jesus says? Didn't the Messiah have to suffer? Yeah, he did. See, he was wounded for my transgression. He was bruised for my iniquity. Judah was going to stay because Benjamin, quote unquote, had committed a crime. It's this transaction that we've got to recognize, or we'll never understand what it means to be a Christian. Now, please let your servant remain here as my Lord's slave in place of the boy. Let him go back with his brothers. Watch this. For how can I go back to my father without the boy? I could not bear to see the grief that would overwhelm my father. Take this. Go to the moment when Jesus is being arrested. Peter's out there just whacking away, trying to kill whatever he can find. And Jesus says, stop. Don't you know, if I wanted to, I could call down 12 legions of angels to save me. I'm not trying to escape this moment. I'm trying to help you escape through this moment. So Judah doesn't say, how can I get myself out of this? He says, how can I put myself in a position to get Benjamin out of this? Why? Because my father adores Benjamin. My father loves him. And I want to please my father, and I want to love my father because I want him to go home. I cannot bear it. So Jesus says, I could do this if I wanted to, but my father would be devastated because his soul is wrapped up with the souls of his creatures. Now, Benjamin has some choices right now, right? So imagine this playing out. Benjamin's sitting in prison. Judah walks back in and goes, says, Benjamin, here's the deal. I'm going to stay in your place. I've made a deal with this guy that's in charge. I will stay in your place. You go home. I will stay here. I will sacrifice. I will be here. Benjamin has some options right here. And we see this in the world's reaction to the gospel. What if Benjamin says, I don't really believe that I'm a slave. I don't believe that I'm enslaved at all. And oblivious to the fact that he's in a cell and not allowed to leave. Completely oblivious. He says, you don't need to do that. I'm not enslaved at all. Or he could say this, no, Judah, you don't need this. You go on back. I will earn my way out of this. Even though the sentence has been, you will be my slave for life without parole, I'll just earn my way out of it. I'll just figure out a way to fix this myself. Or he could say, thank you. Knowing full well he could not do this of himself, he could just say, thank you. Now, what does he owe Judah at that point? What does Benjamin owe Judah at that point? How will he treat the people in Judah's family? What will he do on Judah's birthday? What do we do on Christ's birthday? How have we treated Christmas? In light of the fact that he stayed in our place, that Christ died in our place and set us free. Now, what do we do on his birthday? Do we honor him? How do we treat the people, the fellow creatures around us? You see, it's not so that he will do this. Benjamin wasn't, here, I'll go do all these nice things so that Judah will stay in my place. No, that's not the Christian life. That's not the gospel. The gospel is this: because he did stay in your place, how will you behave? How will you see other people? How will you love on other people? How will you respond to being saved, redeemed, ransomed? That's the question. And if you are one who has been redeemed, what are you doing about it? At the end of Genesis, Jacob takes all of his kids and he speaks a blessing over them. And in Genesis 49, it says this: Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the necks of your enemies, and your father's sons will bow down to you. Judah is a young lion. My son, you return from the kill. He crouches, he lies down like a lion or a lioness. Who dares to rouse him? Verse 10 says this: the scepter will not depart from Judah, or the staff from between his feet, until he whose right it is comes, and the obedience of the peoples belongs to him. I wonder, was the blessing given to Judah a result of the fact that he volunteered to stay in the place of his brother? See, there's a prophet who speaks in 2 Chronicles 16, and he tells King Asa, the eyes of the Lord look throughout the earth, seeking someone who will be strong on his behalf. And Judah was. I wonder if Judah got this blessing because he was strong. And God says, that's the courage I'm looking for. That's the family line I'm going to work through. I can't work through Reuben. Reuben is fearful. He's a coward. Reuben would have never, ever made it past Gethsemane. Oh, but Judah's line, there's something in there. There's something in the line of Judah that has no fear, that does not hesitate in the face of fear. There is courage there. And that line goes through the line of Christ, and Christ stands up there at Gethsemane and says, I don't want to do this, but whatever your will is, I will do it, and I will bring your children home to you, Father, no matter what it takes. And you're, each and every one of us, you are Benjamin. You have been rescued because Judah's great-great-great-great-great-grandson died in your place. Now, what will you do about it? Let's pray. Father, don't ever, ever let us think that the Christian life is just about do's and don'ts. Don't ever let us lose sight of that old rugged cross. May we cherish it. May we think of it constantly. May we think of how much you love us constantly. And may we cling to that old rugged cross as if this is the only thing I can hold on to. This is the one thing I'm not letting go of. This is the one thing that compels every thought that I have. This is the one thing that makes me the person that I am. So may we cherish what Christ did for us. May we see the sacrifice of Judah. May we see the offer that was made. And may we understand that God was just showing us and painting us a picture of what Christ was going to do for us. Oh, Father, may we all see ourselves as Benjamin. May we all see ourselves as guilty, enslaved to the penalty of sin until the day you came. Until the day you came and became flesh and walked up Calvary's mountain and died in my place. You took on all my sin, you took on all my shame, and you gave me your righteousness. Father, let me do something beautiful with it.